The Bible is one long story in one big book. Well, not really one book, it's actually 66 books. And this long story starts in the Old Testament with Adam and Eve, who get thrown out of the Garden of Eden. And then it talks about Israel and the many kings who sat on thrones. But that's like a different type of throne. We see Jonah thrown overboard to a whale, and Daniel gets thrown in the lion's den. And eventually we get to Jesus in the New Testament. Some people hope that he would overthrow the government, but he was more interested in people's hearts. Then there are several letters written by guys like Paul who were thrown in jail. And finally, we read about Jesus sitting on a throne in heaven. I feel like I'm talking way too much about thrones. Let me try again. So, the Bible. Long story short.
Well, good morning, Transit. Good morning. How you feeling? Awesome. My name is Kevin. I'm excited to be here with y'all this morning. If it is your very first time here in Transit, we are so pumped that you chose to spend Sunday morning with us. We hope that it is awesome. We hope you have fun and that you feel welcome and that you belong here. And we hope more than anything that you come back and see us again very, very soon. I'm excited to be here because we are continuing a series that I love called Long Story Short, where we get to talk to you a little bit about the Bible and how it was put together and answer really a question for y'all about really how to read the Bible, because it can be a very daunting task. But there's a few times in this that I kind of want to interact with y'all a little, so I'll make sure you're awake here. So does anybody remember, just testing to see if you're paying attention, the Bible, we said, is not just one book, but it is how many books? 66, awesome. Anybody remember how we said the Bible is broken up into like two main parts? What's the name of that first part? Old Testament, good, yes, okay. Now here's a tougher one. Does anybody remember how many categories of books are in the Old Testament? Close, 5, close. 4, we have 4. So here's a recap from last week right here. We have the law, the books of the law. This is 5. I think this is what y'all were probably thinking, is these 5 right here. Then we have history, 12 books of that. Wisdom and poetry, 5 books, and then 17 books from the prophets. And that makes up about 3/5 of the Bible, right? And then we jump forward to the second major part of the Bible. Anybody know what that's called? The New Testament. That's right. Very creative names. Old Testament, New Testament. It's awesome. Very easy to remember. And that is what I get the privilege to talk a little bit about. I want to talk about the New Testament today, and then a specific part of the New Testament. So, the New Testament is broken down in a similar way that the Old Testament is. We have 4 categories in the New Testament, and they are right here. The first 4 books of the New Testament are called the Gospels. This is where we read about the life and ministry of Jesus in just these 4 books at the beginning of the New Testament. And then we have a book of history called Acts, and that is the history of the early church and how the news of Jesus and people following Jesus spread around the Mediterranean area in the early days after Jesus' life, death, and resurrection. And then we have 21 letters, and these are, we look at them now as books of the Bible, and they are, but when they were originally written, they were just letters from one person to another, or from one person to a group of people, trying to encourage them in their faith, trying to give them advice and wisdom, and just to lift them up. And so we have these 21 letters. We talk a lot about these. A guy named Paul, you'll hear us talk about him here all the time. He wrote a lot of those letters. And then the last book of the Bible is a book of prophecy. And so that is how our New Testament kind of breaks down. And what I get the privilege of today is to sit in these 4 books right here and just talk about the Gospels. And if we look here, just about everything that we know from Jesus' life is contained right here in these pages, in this part of the Bible. These are the 4 Gospels. And there's 4 of them because it's all kind of a similar story, but from a different perspective, because they're written by 4 different people in 4 different perspectives on Jesus' life and his ministry. And I'm going to talk about a couple of those people in just a minute, but that is where we get so much of what we know about Jesus from, is in those 4 Gospels. And if you've been around Transit at all, or if you've grown up in church at all, you may have heard us, and when we talk about Jesus, there's some specific things we say sometimes. We talk a lot about the idea of following Jesus, and we also talk about the idea of having a personal relationship with Jesus. And now it can be really easy to think like, okay, if I'm supposed to have a personal relationship with Jesus, but didn't Jesus live like a really long time ago? And so Jesus actually lived and died about 2,000 years ago. And so when we think about that and the idea of trying to have a personal relationship, like I can't stand in front of him and see him, and I can't have like a back and forth conversation with him where I say and he talks back and all this stuff. So like, how on earth do I get to know him? And honestly, we can wonder to ourselves as people like me stand up here and say that you should have a personal relationship with Jesus, like, how can I really know Jesus? Like, he lived so long ago, I can't just like shoot him a text and have him text me back. Like, we can't go hang out somewhere together and like see him face to face. And so, like, can I really even know Jesus? And how do I do that if it's possible? How do I have a personal relationship with someone that I can't see and have a back and forth conversation with? And so when I was thinking about that idea, I just kind of thought about like, well, how do we get to know anybody? Like, what do we do to get to know people? And so I have a question for y'all in the room here. Like, I know we're about a month into the school year here. You've got a big break coming up in a week, right? Your first big break from school. How many of you, and I know a lot of you, you're at a new school for the first time this year. Some of you, maybe you're in classes with people that you haven't been in classes with before. So quick show of hands, how many of you would say that you have gotten to know somebody new this school year so far? Okay, wow, yeah, a lot of you. And for those of you who maybe didn't, maybe you've gotten to know somebody better this year that you didn't know very well before, but you knew. And if maybe you've even just stayed in your own tight little circle this year, but at some point, we have all spent time getting to know people over and over and over again. And so I'm curious, what do y'all think? And you can feel free to just give me some answers here. What do you do to get to know somebody? What are some of the things that you do when you want to get to know someone or get to know them better? Go ahead, you can just call out answers. Talk to them, okay, what else? Text with them, yes, that's a version of talking nowadays, right? What else? Ask them questions, okay, anything else? Spend time with them, that's good, yep, okay. Great, those are all awesome. So here's what I'm gonna do. And if you are like, hey, I really want to get to know more people, or like I want to get to know people better, you can go ahead and take a picture of this in just a minute when I go off, because I'm giving you a really simple 3-step plan that helps you get to know people. And this applies to anybody you want to get to know or get to know better. And the first step is that we simply spend time with them. That's the first step. Like, there is nothing that can replace the aspect of spending time with somebody to get to know them. Like, there's no fast track to just all of a sudden, I'm just gonna skip all that and just all of a sudden I know them better. No, we have to spend time with them. The second thing we have to do is we have to listen to them, right? Like, it's really good to talk, and when we're talking, like we're letting other people get to know us, and that's great. We should let people get to know us, but in order to get to know someone else, we really have to spend time listening to them, and listening to them with the intent to understand and to be curious and to get to know who they are. And so we listen to what they say, because a lot of times the things that we think about and the things that we feel on the inside, they kind of come out in the things that we say. So we have to listen to them. And then the last thing is we need to pay attention to what they do. Because I know you guys have probably all seen this. There are people who will say one thing and do something else, right? And so you want to watch and pay attention, like, how do they act? Do the things that they do line up with the things that they say, or are they in conflict with each other? And so as we get to know someone, we spend time with them, we listen to them, and we watch and pay attention to what they do. And as we do that over and over with people, we really will begin to understand more and more about who they are and what their personality is like and what their character is like as we get to know them even more. And what's really cool about the Gospels is that the Gospels, the accounts of Jesus' life, were actually written. One of the main reasons they were written is so that people like you and me who don't get a chance to stand face to face with Jesus and have this back and forth conversation with him, that we can have a chance to really get to know Jesus. And in fact, John, who is one of the authors of the 4th gospel, so Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, those are our 4 gospels. The last one, John was somebody who knew Jesus very, very well, and who walked with Jesus and spent time with him, was very close to Jesus' family. And at the very end of his writing, near the very end, he's writing and says exactly why he wrote all of this stuff down. And he says this, if you want to follow along in your Bibles with us, in John chapter 20 and verse 31. And here's what he said. But these are written, meaning these things, all of the things that I've written down here, these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. And he says this right here, that you may believe. This is why I wrote it down. And now the thing is, this word believe here, the way that we interpret this sometimes is like, oh, believe, like to know that something's true. That's it, like to know a fact about something. So I believe it, I know that it's true. But this word, if you look at the original Greek that this was written in and the way that that word was used during that time when it was written, it actually is a much more personal word. That word believe there really means to have a relational trust in somebody. That you know the person, you've built a relationship with them, and because of that, you can trust them, you can believe in them. And John said, that is why I've written these things down, so that you can know Jesus and who he is, and that you can believe in him. And there's another person who gives a similar reason to why he writes it down. The other gospel we're going to look at is from the perspective of Luke. Now, what I love about Luke is that Luke was a physician. And so Luke was this very, very detail-oriented person. He loved to document every little detail and note that you can find. It's what makes his gospel really fascinating. It's part of why we like to read from Luke for the Christmas story. It's a great book. And Luke actually is unique of the four gospels in the sense that Luke never met Jesus face to face. Luke was just like you and I, where he had heard what Jesus had done and became a Jesus follower because of other people sharing what Jesus had done. And so because he had never gotten to meet him face to face, he went ahead and he's like, I'm going to look at everything I can possibly find about Jesus. And here's what he says at the very beginning of his letter, of his gospel. He writes this in chapter 1, starting in verse 3. He says, since I myself have carefully investigated everything from the beginning, I too decided to write an orderly account for you, so that you may know the certainty of the things you have been taught. Luke says, very much similar to John, like, hey, listen, I investigated all of this. I didn't get to meet him face to face either. I didn't get to have a back and forth conversation, but you know what I did? I went and talked to everyone that I could about Jesus and found everything I could so that you could know him with certainty, that you could know that the things written down here are true, and this is who Jesus is. And he shared all of that with us in his gospel. And so as we think of that original question of like, can we really know Jesus? The truth is that we can really know Jesus through the Gospels, through these books that we have here, the 4 books of the Gospels, the detailed accounts of his life and ministry. We can know Jesus through them. And it's really simple because we can take the same steps that we use to get to know anybody else, and we can use them to get to know Jesus. And so the first one we said was to spend time with him, right? So we need to spend time reading the Gospels. There's no substitute, just like when getting to know somebody, there's no fast track to get to know them without spending time with them. We need to spend time in the Gospels reading about Jesus and about his life. The second thing we said was to listen to them, so we need to listen to the words of Jesus. In fact, for some of you, in your Bibles, you'll find that the words of Jesus are written in red ink. There's some Bibles that do that. They print the words of Jesus in red. For others of you, you just need to look at where Jesus talks and where the quotation marks are, because when we see the words of Jesus recorded, we should pay special attention to them, just like we would if we're getting to know somebody, we would listen to what they say. So we listen to the words of Jesus. What is he trying to say here? What does he mean by this when he says this? And then lastly, we said we need to pay attention to what they do. We just need to pay attention to what Jesus did. Like, what were the things that were worth Jesus' time? What did he spend his time doing? What was worth interrupting him? What was worth him spending time doing with somebody or with people? Just like with your friends, you look and see, what do they do? And it shows you so much about their character. You find out, hey, does what you do line up with what you say? And we can see that in the life of Jesus as well. What did he spend his time doing? And the truth is, as we read passages of the Gospels with this in mind, we also want to ask ourselves a question at the end of this, because the reason we have a relationship with somebody is not just to know them. Like if it was just about knowing facts about somebody, then we could just do that quickly and just move on. But we want to have a relationship with someone because we hope that that relationship has an impact on the way we live our life. That's true of your friends, right? You hope your friends impact your life because you hope they're there for you when you need them. You hope they encourage you and lift you up and have fun with you. It's true about your teachers and your coaches and your parents. Like you want that relationship because you hope that it impacts your life. And so as we read these sections of the gospel and we read about the story of Jesus' life and we look at his words and his actions, the best way to learn from that is to ask ourselves this question as we do. How can knowing Jesus better in this way impact how I live my life? It's a really simple question. And this whole process is a really simple process to get to know Jesus better. But it takes intentionality and discipline of I'm going to spend time with him today. I'm going to spend time in the Gospels learning about Jesus better today, and then finding out how can knowing him better impact my life. So right now we're going to head to small group and you're going to get to practice that together with your group. But first, we're going to read the first section that you're going to go and go through this process with together. So if you turn in your Bibles to Mark, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, those are the four Gospels. So it's the second one right after Matthew. We're going to be in chapter 1, so the very beginning of Mark, in verse 40 and 42. And I'm going to read this from the New Living Translation. Yours might be a little bit worded differently. That's okay. Here's what it says. A man with leprosy came and knelt in front of Jesus, begging to be healed. If you are willing, you can heal me and make me clean, he said. And moved with compassion, Jesus reached out and touched him. I am willing, he said. Be healed. Instantly, the leprosy disappeared and the man was healed. So right now, you're going to get ready to head to small group. We're going to look at what were the words of Jesus, what were his actions, and how can what we learn about Jesus impact the way we live our lives.